Why was she, the only one standing still, when the others rushed into cover? The storm of boots, shouts, and rattling gear filled the air, yet she remained rooted in the open. Her silhouette cut against the fading light, unmoved, unreadable. Some thought it was hesitation. Others thought it was arrogance. But none of them knew the truth. None of them understood the silence she carried like a weapon sharper than steel. They called her captain, but not always with respect. Some whispered the quiet one, others, harsher, muttered, the ghost. She didn't answer to either. She only answered to the mission. And in this mission, hesitation could kill them all. The valley below stretched wide and unforgiving. A ribbon of dust-colored road carved its way between jagged cliffs, vanishing into shadows that seemed to breathe with unseen eyes. Somewhere out there, an enemy convoy moved under cover of silence, waiting for them to slip. Somewhere in that darkness lay the target, a man who had already written death across villages and left silence where laughter once lived. And yet, as the men around her prepared weapons, checked scopes, muttered prayers, she did nothing but stare into the distance. Why? Because there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The headset crackled, breaking the thin veil of calm. Team Alpha, check comms. Voices answered in quick succession, confident, controlled. Hers came last, softer, steadier. Copy. No hesitation, no tremor. And still, they didn't know what lay beneath that calm. Her gloved hand brushed the worn fabric of her vest, fingers pausing at a folded scrap tucked into a hidden pocket. No one noticed. No one ever noticed. That small crease of paper carried more weight than her rifle, more weight than the orders etched into the mission file. It was the reason she stood when others crouched, the reason her silence was louder than any anthem sung back home. But the paper would remain unseen, for now. The wind shifted, carrying the dry scent of sand and smoke. Somewhere, a child's laughter rang in her memory, quick and bright, and then it was gone, cut short as if the wind itself had silenced it. She shut her eyes for a fraction of a second, just enough to bury the sound back where it belonged. When she opened them again, her eyes were the color of stone. Captain, one of the younger soldiers' morals, glanced her way. His voice carried the unsteady rhythm of someone new, someone not yet hardened by repetition of loss. He wanted reassurance. He wanted a nod. She gave neither. Only the faintest flicker of her gaze, enough for him to know she had heard, enough to keep him steady but never soft. Inside, though, there was conflict. She remembered being young once, believing orders were unshakable, believing commanders were unbreakable. She remembered when she too had looked for that nod, and she remembered the day it never came. The convoy was late, or maybe they were early. The waiting was its own kind of battle. Patience dug under the skin, made nerves itch. Men fidgeted with triggers, adjusted straps, bit back words. She remained still. Stillness was her rebellion, her discipline, her shield. But stillness could also break a person from the inside out. She felt it, the pressure behind her ribs, the ache of unspoken thoughts. They never asked what it cost her to be this quiet. They never asked what she left behind when she boarded the plane that brought her here. And maybe that was easier. Words complicated things. Silence carried them cleaner. A crow cut across the sky, black wings slicing the pale horizon. It landed on a rock, watching them with sharp, indifferent eyes. She followed its gaze, wondering if it saw them as soldiers or as prey. For a moment, she envied its simplicity. Captain, orders. Another voice pressed, impatient, almost demanding. That was Sergeant Kane, older, scarred, the kind of man who didn't take kindly to silence. He believed in noise, orders barked, threats made, courage shouted into the void. Her quiet unnerved him. He would never say it, but she saw it in the tightness of his jaw, the restless tap of his finger against the rifle grip. She didn't look at him. Instead, she scanned the valley one more time, ears straining against the vast hum of emptiness. There it was, faint, distant. The low growl of engines, hidden beneath layers of sand and stone. Most wouldn't have caught it yet. She did. Her silence trained her ears to listen deeper than others dared. "They're coming," she said softly. Heads turned, doubt flickered, then confirmation. A faint dust cloud rising just barely visible. Eyes widened, whispers stopped. Kane grunted, adjusting his stance. "How the hell did you?" She cut him off with a glance. Not sharp, not cruel, just final. Engines grew louder, a slow thunder rolling closer. The men shifted into position. Breathing steadied. Fingers curved around cold steel. She lowered herself at last, kneeling beside Morales. He looked at her as though she carried some unspoken secret. And she did. He'd never know it, but in the way he fumbled with his scope, in the way his breath hitched, he reminded her of someone. Someone who would never fumble again. Her chest tightened. She forced it down. Not now, not here. The convoy rolled into sight. 3 vehicles, armored, dust trailing like smoke from unseen fires. The target would be inside one of them. But which? That detail, the most important, remained hidden. The order was to wait, to watch, to confirm before they acted. But waiting carried risk. Too long and the convoy could vanish into the mountains, into shadows that would swallow them whole. Too soon, and they'd risk striking the wrong man, exposing themselves for nothing. Her hand brushed the folded paper again, hidden against her chest. The words written on it burned like fire she couldn't extinguish. They told her why she couldn't afford to fail, why silence wasn't weakness, it was promise. "Captain," Morales whispered, nervous. His eyes begged for guidance. She whispered back, barely moving her lips. "Breathe, count to 4, then again." He nodded, exhaling shakily, trying to mimic her calm. It was enough. The first vehicle passed, its windows dark, faces hidden. The second followed, heavier, riding low, suggesting weight, armor, or someone important. The third trailed, slower, like an afterthought. She didn't blink, didn't breathe. The world narrowed to the hum of engines, the crackle of radios, the pounding in her ears. She watched the second vehicle, her instincts screaming, her silence louder than the noise around her. And then, a child's face appeared in the window, wide eyes, curious, innocent. The world tilted. The breath she trained herself to hold slipped free. A child, here, how, why? The target was supposed to be ruthless, careful, unmerciful, but children complicated everything. Her finger froze above the trigger. She felt Kane's gaze on her, waiting, expecting, ready to act. The radio hissed with static. Higher command demanded confirmation. She said nothing. Her silence stretched. It became unbearable. The others shifted, restless. Doubt clawed at their edges. And still she said nothing. Because in that moment she wasn't captain. She wasn't the ghost. She wasn't the quiet one. She was someone's daughter, someone's memory, someone who once heard laughter in the distance and believed it would never be silenced. The convoy rolled forward, slow and steady, carrying with it questions no one had answers to. She lowered her weapon. Kane hissed, "What the hell are you doing?" She didn't answer, couldn't. Words would break the fragile line she walked. Silence was safer. Silence carried the weight she couldn't explain. The child's face disappeared as the vehicle moved past. Dust swallowed the image. Engines faded into the horizon. And just like that, the opportunity was gone. Her men looked at her in disbelief. Confusion, some even anger. Kane's jaw tightened, his voice low with threat. "You just let him go." She didn't move, didn't defend herself. She simply looked into the distance, eyes hard, silence louder than his rage. Because there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The mission wasn't about orders, it wasn't about targets. For her, it was personal. And though she just let the convoy vanish into shadows, she knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Why was no one speaking to her? The air around the briefing table was thick, suffocating. Men shifted in their chairs, avoiding her gaze, their silence louder than accusations. The mission report glowed faintly on the screen at the far end of the tent, but no one dared to look at it for long. Too many questions lingered in the space between them. The convoy had slipped away. The target unconfirmed, unmarked, unclaimed. To them it was failure, to her it was survival. But how do you explain survival when no one wants to hear it? The commanding officer, a man whose face was carved from stone, slammed his hand against the table. We had him, we had him. His voice was thunder, shaking cups, rattling pens. He didn't need to name her. Every eye had already turned her way. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Silence was her only shield. Sergeant Kane leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes narrow. His silence wasn't like hers. His silence was sharp, pointed, dripping with disdain. Morale sat on the far end, hands clasped, eyes down, guilt swimming in his features though he'd done nothing wrong. The others sat between, their weight shifting with doubt, suspicion, and something else, fear. Finally Kane broke. You froze. His voice was low, cutting. You had the shot, you let it go, for what? Her eyes lifted to meet his. Calm, steady. A storm hidden behind stone, she could have answered. She could have explained the child's face, the sudden blur of memory that struck like a knife. But what would that do? Would they understand? Or would it only fracture the fragile trust left between them? So she said nothing. The commander's jaw tightened. Captain, this isn't the time for games. Your silence cost us. I need an explanation or you're out. Her chest tightened at the ultimatum. She had heard those words before, different place, different time. And the last time, silence had saved lives. She closed her eyes just for a breath and let the memory pull her back. Snow, not sand. A ruined village. A mother's scream echoing across broken walls. She had pulled the trigger too fast then, too fast. The result still lived inside her like a scar that would never fade. She had learned something that day. Sometimes the hardest choice wasn't when to fire, it was when not to. Her eyes opened, she met the commander's stare, and still silence. He slammed his fist again, harder this time, and turned away, muttering curses under his breath. Kane's laughter was bitter, cold. Ghost, huh? More like dead weight. Morale shifted uncomfortably, glancing at her with quiet desperation, as if pleading for her to say something, anything. She gave him only a glance, soft enough to anchor him, but not enough to soothe her own guilt. The meeting ended without resolution. Papers shuffled. Boots scraped. Men filed out, some whispering, others muttering, none of them daring to confront her directly. She remained seated, alone at the table, her hands resting on the wood like shadows. When the tent finally emptied, the silence deepened. Only then did she reach into her vest and pull out the folded scrap of paper. Her fingers trembled, not visibly, but just enough to remind her she was human. She unfolded it slowly, reverently, as if the paper itself might disintegrate under her touch. The handwriting was small, careful, a child's scrawl, the words simple, almost naive. Come back, promise me. Her throat tightened. She refolded it quickly, pressing it back against her chest. The paper was her anchor, her burden, her vow. No one would ever see it. Not Morales, not Kane, not even Command, especially not Command. That night sleep didn't come. The desert wind howled against the thin canvas walls, carrying with it whispers of laughter, screams, silence. She lay awake, staring at the faint outline of the ceiling, listening to the steady breathing of men around her. Even their dreams sounded heavy. Her own thoughts churned, restless. She replayed the convoy over and over. The child's face, the dust, the choice. She questioned herself, had she made the right call, or had she let her ghosts guide her hand? She didn't know, maybe she would never know. But one thing was certain, hesitation had consequences, and those consequences weren't done with her yet. At dawn, they were summoned again. The next mission already on the table, different location, same target, a second chance, but second chances came with sharper knives. The commander's tone was clipped, unforgiving. This time there will be no mistakes. His eyes cut to her, hard and unrelenting. Do you understand? She gave a single nod, small, controlled, enough to satisfy, not enough to reveal the storm beneath. Outside, the sun rose, casting the desert in blinding gold. Men moved with renewed urgency, checking gear, testing weapons, muttering plans. She moved among them like a shadow, her presence both grounding and unsettling. Some avoided her gaze. Others stared too long. Morales walked beside her, hesitant, carrying unasked questions in his silence. Finally, he whispered, "Why didn't you take the shot?" She didn't look at him. Sometimes the obvious choice isn't the right one. But wasn't that the target? His voice cracked slightly. She paused, a beat, a silence heavy with weight. "You'll understand one day." Morales looked away, frowning. He wanted more but knew better than to push. She could feel his conflict, the loyalty pulling him toward her, the doubt pulling him away. She remembered that feeling too well. Trust was fragile. Once cracked, it never healed the same. The mission led them into the mountains. Jagged peaks rose like teeth, sharp against the sky. The air grew thinner, colder. Each step echoed against stone, magnifying their presence. They moved in silence, careful, deliberate. She led from the center, not in front, not behind, where she could see both the path ahead and the shadows behind. Hours passed. The weight of the silence grew heavier than their packs. Then movement, distant, a flicker of light, the convoy again, smaller this time, slower, vulnerable. The team dropped into position, spreading across the ridgeline. Kane's voice hissed through the comms. "We've got him. No kids this time, Captain, no excuses." Her jaw tightened. He didn't say it with malice. He said it with certainty. That certainty was dangerous. She adjusted her scope, eyes narrowing on the lead vehicle. Inside, a face. Not the target, not the man they sought, just another soldier, young, tired, unaware of what hunted him. She shifted her aim. The second vehicle. Another face. Older, bearded, close, too close, but not him. Then the third vehicle. Shadowed, hidden, she couldn't see, couldn't confirm. Her finger hovered above the trigger. Time stretched thin, stretched brittle. The radio crackled, voices urging her to fire. Her silence stretched again, pressing against the edges of their patience. And then movement in the third vehicle. A hand, briefly visible, adorned with a ring she had seen in grainy photos during the briefing. The target, finally. She drew in a breath, held it steadied. But just as her finger tightened, a memory stabbed through. The laughter of a child, the folded paper, the promise. Her heart faltered. And in that pause, the convoy veered. A sudden turn, a hidden path. Engines roared and they vanished behind a curtain of stone. Gone. Again. The radio erupted. Shouts, curses, accusations. Kane's voice louder than all. "Damn it, Captain, twice. Twice you let him slip." She exhaled, lowering her weapon slowly. The silence around her wasn't steady anymore. It cracked, fractured, bled into doubt even she couldn't contain. This time she wasn't sure if she had chosen silence, or if silence had chosen her. She stood alone, but what came next, no one expected. The night was colder than it should have been. In the desert, cold creeps in silently, wrapping around bones, making even the toughest soldiers shiver beneath their gear. But the cold that pressed against her chest that night wasn't from the air. It came from within, from the weight of silence, from the accusing stares she carried like scars. The campfire crackled low, shadows bending against the canvas walls. A few men sat close, whispering stories to drown the day. Morales laughed at something faintly, though his voice carried no joy. Kane didn't laugh at all. He sat apart, cleaning his weapon, every scrape of the brush against metal sharp, deliberate, almost violent. She sat on the far edge of camp, not invited but not excluded. Presence was tolerated, not welcomed. Her eyes wandered across the flame, unfocused, caught between here and somewhere else. Somewhere where laughter didn't sound hollow. Somewhere where promises weren't broken. Morales glanced her way. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. He looked away quickly, ashamed of something he hadn't done. She almost wanted to tell him not to carry guilt that wasn't his, but words felt heavy, foreign. So she stayed silent. "2 times," Kane muttered suddenly, loud enough for everyone to hear. 2 damn times the target slipped through her hands. The fire hissed, spitting sparks. No one answered, no one dared. Twice, Kane repeated, leaning into the silence like a blade. What happens the third time? You all ready to die for her hesitation? Morales flinched, opening his mouth, then closing it. The others kept their heads down, stirring rations, staring into flames, pretending the words didn't matter. But they did. They mattered more than any bullet because bullets could wound flesh. Words could wound trust. She didn't move, didn't react. That was what Kane hated most about her, the way her silence refused to give him victory. But inside, she wasn't untouched. His words cut deep, reopening wounds she had buried under years of training, years of missions. She remembered the first time she'd been doubted, the first time a commander had told her she didn't belong, that her quiet meant weakness. She had proved them wrong then, but proof didn't erase scars. She rose slowly, standing above the firelight, her shadow stretching across the sand. No words, just movement. And then she walked away into the dark. The night wrapped around her, vast and empty. The stars above glittered cold, uncaring. She walked until the fire was only a glow behind her, until the murmurs faded, until she could breathe without feeling the weight of their stares. At the ridge she stopped. The valley stretched before her, endless, silent. The same valley that had hidden the convoy twice now, the same silence that mocked her every choice. She sat on the rock, pulled the folded paper from her vest and unfolded it again. The handwriting trembled in the starlight. "Come back, promise me." Her chest ached. She closed her eyes, letting the memory in. It was years ago. A kitchen. The hum of an old refrigerator, the smell of soap and warm bread. A small voice asking if she really had to leave again. Her own voice promising it wouldn't be for long, promising she'd come back, always. But promises in war were fragile things, and silence was the only way to keep them alive. She folded the paper back, pressed it against her chest, and whispered, barely audible, "I will." The wind carried her words away, scattering them across the stones. Behind her, footsteps crunched lightly against the sand. She tensed, hand brushing her sidearm. Then she heard Morale's voice, quiet, hesitant. "Captain." She didn't turn. You scare them," he said softly, stopping a few paces behind. "The silence, they don't know what it means." She let the silence linger between them, wondering if he'd leave. He didn't. His breathing was nervous, uneven. Finally, she spoke, her voice low, almost fragile. "It means I'm thinking." "About what?" She hesitated. How much could she tell him? How much could she trust him with? He was young, still learning the cruelty of this world. But he had eyes like hers once, eyes that still believed in answers. "About choices," she said finally. "Choices. When to act, when not to." She paused, then added, "When to live with what you've done, and when to live with what you didn't." Morales swallowed. The weight of her words pressed into him. "You think we'll get another chance?" She didn't answer right away. She watched the valley, the shadows shifting like ghosts. Finally, she said, "We'll get one. We always do. The question is what it will cost." Silence settled again. Morales shifted, uncomfortable. Then softer, "Why do you carry that paper? I see you touch it every time." Her breath caught. She turned, finally meeting his gaze in the starlight. His eyes were searching, almost pleading. For a second she wanted to tell him, wanted to let someone else carry the weight, even just a little. But then she saw the innocence still clinging to him, the hope not yet broken. She shook her head, "Not tonight." Morales nodded, disappointed but understanding. He looked away, giving her back the silence. After a moment he turned and walked back toward camp. She watched him go, her chest heavy with words unsaid. The night stretched long, hours crawled. Finally she rose and returned to camp, her silence thicker than ever. Kane glanced up as she entered, his eyes hard, but he said nothing. Not tonight. At dawn, orders came again. New intel, another chance. The target was moving toward a hidden compound deep in the mountains, heavily guarded, time-sensitive. If they missed him this time, they might never get another. The team prepared quickly. Packs loaded, rifles checked, comms tested. Morales moved with quiet determination. Kane moved with cold efficiency. She moved with something else entirely, a weight they couldn't see. As they advanced into the mountains, the path grew harsher. Stones cut their boots, the air thinned, the climb steepened. Every step was a battle. Sweat dripped, breaths shortened, tempers tightened. Kane muttered under his breath, loud enough for her to hear. "Third time's the charm, ghost," or "third time's the grave." She ignored him, but the words lodged deep. Hours later, they reached the ridge overlooking the compound. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across stone walls, guard towers, and vehicles parked in rows. The target was inside. This time, she could feel it. The men spread out, taking positions. Scopes aligned, radios whispered. The commander's voice came through the comms, sharp, demanding, "Confirm target, do not lose him this time." Her eyes scanned every shadow, every doorway, and then she saw him. A tall figure stepping out of a vehicle, ring flashing in the dying light. The target, finally clear. Her breath steadied, her finger hovered. But then something else, a movement at his side. A boy no older than 12 carrying a tray, his small hands trembling under its weight. A servant, or maybe just a child forced into service. Her chest tightened. Again a child. Again innocence tangled in violence. She froze. The radio hissed. "Take the shot," Kane's voice urgent, eager. "Do it, ghost." Her eyes flickered between the man and the boy. Her heart hammered. Her promise echoed. "Come back, promise me." She hesitated. And in that hesitation, the target moved inside, disappeared, gone. The radio exploded with fury. Shouts, curses, the commander's rage boiling through the static, Kane's voice sharp and accusing. "You're done, Captain, you're finished." She lowered her weapon slowly, her silence heavier than ever. Around her, the men shifted, their faith fractured beyond repair. Morales looked at her, his eyes wide, not with anger but with fear. Fear that she was no longer the anchor he believed in. And in that moment, she wondered if he was right. Because silence could protect. But silence could also destroy. She didn't move when the first shot echoed through the valley. It wasn't hers, it wasn't her choice. It was Kane's, loud, decisive, reckless. The crack of his rifle split the evening silence, ricocheting off the stone cliffs. Dust plumed near the compound wall, stone fragments scattering. And just like that, the mission shifted. Guards scrambled. Sirens wailed. Lights flared across the compound like angry eyes opening all at once. The shadows they had hidden in only seconds ago vanished under harsh beams of white. She tightened her grip on the rifle, her jaw set. Kane was already firing again, barking into the comms, "Contact! Move, move!" The others responded without hesitation, falling into the storm of action. But she stayed still, listening, watching. Every instinct screamed at her to act, and yet her silence held her, not out of fear, not out of doubt, but out of something sharper, calculation. She knew what panic did. Panic killed. A figure emerged on the compound's wall, silhouetted against the light. She steadied her aim, exhaled, and pulled the trigger. The shot rang true. The figure fell, silent. It was the first time she had fired in days. The silence inside her cracked, not broken, but opened. Kane cursed into the comms. "Finally awake, ghost." But his voice was drowned beneath the chaos. Bullets rained across the ridge, clattering against stone, whistling past ears. The team ducked low, returning fire in sharp bursts. Morales stumbled near her, his breathing ragged, eyes wide. She grabbed his collar, yanking him down before a shot split the air where his head had been. "Breathe," she hissed into his ear. "Count to 4, then again." He nodded, swallowing panic, clutching his rifle tighter. Her words steadied him just as before. But steadiness was fragile. The compound roared with movement, trucks revved, boots thundered. Voices shouted orders in a language carried on the wind. The target was moving, she knew it. Somewhere inside those walls, he was slipping away again. Her heart pounded. 3 times, 3 hesitations, 3 failures. Could she bear a 4th? Kane's voice cut through. We breach now or we lose him forever. The order hadn't come from command. It came from Kane himself, but the others followed anyway. Trust flowed louder toward his noise than her silence. They began descending the ridge, scrambling down rocks, rushing toward the compound gates. She hesitated. The plan had been observation, not assault. Breach without intel was suicide. But watching them go, she knew hesitation would mean losing more than the mission. It would mean losing them. She moved, sliding down the rocks, boots skidding on gravel, the air burning with dust and gunpowder. She landed behind Morales, covering his flank as he advanced. Kane kicked open a side gate, his rifle spitting fire, his rage louder than strategy. Inside, the compound was chaos. Smoke curled from shattered windows. Radios crackled with panic. Civilians, workers maybe, ran in every direction, their faces twisted with fear. Innocence and guilt blurred together in the same shadows. Her scope searched for the target. Her silence listened for his presence. Then there, a voice, sharp, commanding, rising above the chaos. The ringed hand gesturing, pushing men forward, ordering defenses. Her breath caught, she had him. But between her and him, a boy stumbled into view. The same boy from earlier, tray still in hand, eyes wide with terror. Her finger froze again. The target disappeared behind a doorway, again. And with him went the chance to end it, again. Kane roared, grabbing her shoulder, shoving her forward. Damn it, Captain. Are you trying to lose this war single-handed? She ripped her arm free, eyes burning, but said nothing. Words would only feed his fire. Her silence was her shield, but tonight her silence felt like a wound. Gunfire erupted from the rooftops. Bullets showered down, scattering the team. Morales ducked behind a wall, trembling, firing blindly upward. She dropped beside him, her calm cutting through his panic. Together they aimed, fired, cleared the rooftops one by one. Small victories, brief breaths of control. But control slipped quickly. An explosion rocked the compound, shaking the ground, throwing them against the wall. Dust filled her lungs, ears ringing with static. Through the haze, she saw Kane pinned under debris, shouting, his leg crushed. For a moment she froze. Kane, the man who doubted her, insulted her, undermined her. She could leave him. She could let the silence swallow his noise. But she moved. Dropping her rifle, she heaved against the stone. Muscles screamed, dust choked her throat, but slowly, painfully, she dragged him free. His face, twisted with pain, stared at her in shock. For once he had no words. Move, she ordered, her voice sharp, unshakable. He obeyed. Together they limped toward Morales, regrouping in the shadow of the wall. The compound burned around them. The target was gone again, but they were alive, barely. The radio crackled, command demanding updates. Kane reached for it, but she stopped him, her hand firm on his wrist. She shook her head. His eyes narrowed, confused, furious, but something in her stare silenced him. She took the radio. Her voice was calm, steady. Compound engaged, heavy resistance, target unconfirmed. She paused, then added, team intact. The last words mattered, more than the target, more than the orders. Her silence had broken only to protect them, not to explain herself, not to confess her doubts, but to keep them alive. When the extraction bird arrived hours later, they boarded in silence. Smoke curled from the compound behind them, a scar against the horizon. Morales sat hunched, trembling but alive. Kane sat beside her, leg bandaged, eyes hard, staring but saying nothing. She stared out the open door of the helicopter, the wind whipping her hair, the desert rolling endlessly below. In her chest, the folded paper pressed against her heart, heavier than ever. Come back, promise me. She had kept the promise tonight. Barely, but how many more nights could she? The silence inside her had once been strength. Tonight it felt like chains. And somewhere deep in the desert the target still lived, still breathed, still waited. And she knew the silence between them would not last forever. Why was the boy's face still haunting her? Even now, days later, high above the desert in the drone of a transport bird, his wide eyes followed her into sleep. They reminded her of someone, of something she had buried beneath layers of silence. She rubbed the folded paper in her chest pocket, worn edges cutting faint lines against her palm. No one noticed or pretended not to. The team sat scattered in the cabin, each lost in their own ghosts. Morales was cleaning his weapon too meticulously, hands trembling just enough to betray the images stuck in his head. Kane stared at nothing, jaw tight, legs stiff with pain. No one spoke. The silence between them wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to all of them. When they landed back at the outpost, the desert air was cooler, the night pressing down heavy. The compound burned far away in the horizon, faint smoke still twisting upward. Command wasted no time. Debrief, questions, reports. Kane shouldered his way into the room first, throwing words like grenades. Intel was garbage, compound compromised, target ghosted before we even hit dirt. We need better leads, better timing. She cut him a glance, sharp enough to slice, but said nothing. Silence again, always silence. Command's officer, gray-haired and stone-faced, listened with folded arms. His eyes shifted to her, expecting a counterpoint, a defense, but her lips stayed pressed together. Words couldn't undo what was lost. Later, Morales found her alone outside, leaning against a rusted vehicle under the stars. He hesitated before speaking. "You saved me, back there. If you hadn't pulled me down," his voice faltered. Gratitude clung to him, heavy as guilt. She looked at him, her silence softening just enough to let her hand rest briefly on his shoulder. A silent acknowledgement. He nodded, eyes wet, then walked away. And then she was alone again, with the boy's face, with the folded paper, with the promise. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she replayed the mission in her head. The shot she hadn't taken. The doorway where the target vanished. The innocent caught in between. She tried to convince herself it was calculation, that she had chosen restraint for the right reasons. But deep down, she knew. It wasn't calculation, it was memory. Her silence wasn't born on the battlefield. It was born years before. The rain had been relentless that night, pounding the roof of the small house where she grew up. Her father's voice had thundered over the storm, not cruel but commanding, the voice of a man who had worn the uniform before her. A man who believed service was duty, silence was dignity, sacrifice was the only path to honor. "You don't flinch, you don't falter, you don't let them see you break," he had told her, his calloused hand resting on her shoulder. "Promise me, if the world ever calls on you, you'll stand." And she had promised. But promises made in youth carried a weight unimagined. Because later, years later, another voice had asked for a different promise. Softer, smaller, a child's voice. Her daughter's voice. "Come back, promise me." That was the paper in her pocket. A note scrawled in crayon, folded and tucked against her heart the day she deployed. The one promise she couldn't break. So when she had seen that boy, tray in hand, fear in his eyes, her daughter's face had flashed before her. And her silence had returned, stronger than bullets, heavier than orders. The mission hadn't just been about the target anymore. It had been about her child, about the line between killing to protect and killing to obey. And that line blurred more every day. Command handed them new intel 2 days later. Same target, new location. He had moved north, deeper into hostile territory, shielded by more men, more civilians, more noise. The mission parameters changed. Intercept convoy, capture alive. Kane was eager, too eager. "Redemption shot," he muttered, checking his gear. His eyes flicked to her, sharp with unspoken blame. If she had pulled the trigger earlier, maybe they wouldn't be here now. Morale stayed quiet, but his glances toward her carried something else. Respect, gratitude, confusion. He had seen what silence could do, and it had saved him, but he had also seen what silence had cost. That night before they moved out, she sat alone at the edge of camp, desert winds whispering through scrub grass. The stars spread wide above, infinite and indifferent. She unfolded the paper, tracing the crayon letters with her finger. Come back. Her chest tightened. What if silence wasn't strength anymore? What if silence was the very thing that would destroy them all? The convoy appeared the next morning. Dust trails on the horizon first, then engines rumbling, then the armored trucks cresting the ridge. The team was dug in, hidden in a wadi, rifles trained. Orders were simple: disable the lead vehicle, block the path, force surrender. Simple, but nothing in war was ever simple. Kane fired the first shot again, a rocket-propelled scream tearing into the lead truck. The explosion ripped through the valley, flames devouring metal. The convoy stalled, men shouting, weapons raised. Bullets tore the air. The team returned fire, chaos again. Through the scope she saw him, the target, the ringed hand pushing a child aside as he climbed from the center vehicle, barking orders. Her breath caught. The moment stretched, frozen. This was it. Her finger tightened on the trigger, but again a face. Not her daughter's this time, the boy's, the tray, his wide eyes. Her hands shook. For the first time in years, her hands shook. She pulled her rifle away. And then Kane's shot cracked. The target fell, not dead but bleeding, crawling, screaming. The team surged forward. Morales grabbed her arm. We've got him, let's move. But she didn't move. Not right away. Her silence was louder than ever, crashing against her ribs, suffocating her. Because deep down she knew this wasn't victory. This was survival, and survival wasn't the same as redemption. Hours later, back at base, Kane celebrated with a drink in hand, legs still stiff but pride louder than pain. Morales kept quiet, his eyes darting to her again and again. And she sat alone, tracing the folded paper, her silence cutting deeper than any wound. Because the mission was far from over. The target was captured, but the war inside her had only begun. Her daughter's words echoed again, "Come back, promise me." But how could she return whole, when every silence tore her further apart? Why did the silence in the holding room feel heavier than gunfire? The walls were bare, the light dim, the air stifling. Yet it wasn't the space that suffocated her. It was him. The man with the ringed hand, now shackled to a steel chair, blood crusted along his sleeve where Kane's bullet had torn through muscle. He didn't flinch, didn't beg. His eyes followed her as she entered, unblinking, sharp. Not hatred, not fear, something else. Recognition. "You don't speak," he said, his accent thick but clear. His voice rolled through the silence like a knife dragged slowly across stone. "I watched you on the ridge, in the compound. You do not speak. Why?" Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She closed the door, leaving only the sound of chains rattling faintly as he shifted. He smirked, leaning back. "You hide behind silence because you are weak, because when you speak the truth escapes, and truth is dangerous." She didn't answer, but his words dug deeper than she wanted them to. Because wasn't there truth she was hiding, a truth folded into crayon paper, pressed against her heart? The door opened again. Kane, limping loud, tossing his presence into the room like a challenge. "Save the starring contest. We're not here for games. Where's the pipeline? Where's the supply?" The prisoner ignored him. His eyes never left her. "Say something," Kane snapped at her, frustration burning. "Use that silence of yours to scare him. I don't care how. Just do your job." Her hand twitched at her side. Words sat heavy on her tongue, aching to break free, but she swallowed them. Silence was her weapon, but tonight it felt like his too. Hours passed. The prisoner spoke in circles. Kane stormed out, cursing. Morales checked in with supplies, eyes tired, voice soft. The war ground on outside, but in this room silence was the battlefield. Later, alone again with him, she watched as he shifted in the chair, chains clinking. He studied her the way predators study prey. "You've killed," he said, not a question, a statement. "But you hesitate, you carry something, a ghost." Her chest tightened. He couldn't know he was guessing, testing. "You have a daughter," he said. Her breath caught. He smiled slowly. "Ah, I see it now. That is why your silence shakes. You think of her when you pull the trigger." Her fists curled. She wanted to deny it, to shut him down, but silence betrayed her. Silence confirmed him. That night she sat in her quarters, paper unfolded in her lap. The crayon letters glowed faintly in the lantern light. "Come back. Promise me." Her hands trembled. She had carried the note for months, through missions, through storms, through fire. It had been her anchor, but now it felt like a chain, because every decision bent around it, every hesitation traced back to it, and the war did not bend for promises. The door opened. Morale slipped in, careful, hesitant. "Captain." She folded the paper quickly, slipping it back against her heart. He didn't mention it. Instead, he sat across from her, voice low. "Kane's wrong about you." She looked at him, silent. "He thinks silence is weakness, but it is. You kept me alive. I'd be dead if you hadn't stopped me from panicking. You lead different, not with noise, with," he searched for words, "with steadiness." Her eyes softened, but she said nothing. She couldn't. The words she might have spoken would have cracked something open, something she wasn't ready to break. Morales nodded, accepting the silence as answer enough. Then he added almost shyly, "My mom, she was like that. Quiet. But when she looked at me, I knew, didn't need words." A long pause, a shared wait. Then he stood, leaving her alone again. The next day, the prisoner was gone. The camp erupted in alarms, shouts, frantic orders. Guards swore he had been there at dawn. By midday, only chains lay on the floor, broken. Kane stormed into her quarters, rage blazing. "This is on you. You had his eyes, his silence. You could have broken him, but you didn't. And now he's out there regrouping, laughing at us. You'll get us all killed." She stood, meeting his fury with calm. Her silence cut sharper than his words, but deep down a shard of guilt pierced her, because Kane wasn't entirely wrong. Her silence had played a part. Hours later, reconnaissance confirmed it. The prisoner hadn't escaped alone. He'd been extracted. Someone on the inside had helped. The desert was full of ghosts, shifting loyalties, unseen hands. Command issued new orders. Hunt him again. End it this time. But the question lingered. Would her silence let her? That night she dreamed of her daughter. Not the memory of her face, but the sound of her voice. Clear, high, pleading, "Come back, promise me." She woke in darkness, tears burning hot against her skin. For the first time in years she wanted to scream, but nothing came, only silence. And as dawn broke over the desert, she realized something. Silence was no longer her shield. It had become her prison. The war outside was brutal, but the war inside her was worse. Because soon she would have to choose, her silence or the promise. And either choice would break her. Why did the desert feel quieter than usual? Even with engines rumbling beneath them, even with gear clattering in the back, the silence on the convoy ride north was heavier than sandbags. No jokes, no banter, no Kane filling the air with venom, just silence. And for once it wasn't hers alone. The escape had gutted them. The man they'd risked everything to capture was gone, swallowed back into the desert. Kane's leg injury slowed him. Morales carried shadows in his eyes, and Command's patience was burning away. But for her, the silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was a question circling her mind like a hawk overhead. When the moment comes again, will you take the shot? The convoy jolted over rough ground. Dust plumed in the air, clinging to sweat-coating lips. Morales sat across from her, hands clasped tight, gaze flicking to her every so often, as if drawing strength just by seeing her calm. Kane sat to her right, jaw tight, staring forward, his silence seething with accusation. They reached the staging area at dusk. A crumbling village pressed against jagged cliffs, windows hollow, walls riddled with scars of old battles. Civilians lingered in shadows, watching the soldiers with eyes that held more exhaustion than fear. Their orders were clear: sweep, secure, intercept. The target was believed to be passing through with his men, but orders on paper never matched the dirt under boots. They moved street by street, shadows stretching long in the setting sun. Dogs barked in the distance. A door slammed. A child's cry echoed faintly. Every sound carried weight. She led point, her rifle steady, her breath even. Morales followed, eyes sharp but nerves taut. Kane limped at the rear, muttering curses under his breath. Halfway through the sweep, Morales froze. His hand shot up. "Movement," he whispered. She saw it too. A figure darting between broken walls, fast, deliberate, not a villager, not a child, armed. They tracked him into an alley. The air was thick with dust, the walls closing in. Her pulse quickened, silence roaring in her ears. Then gunfire. The alley exploded with noise. Bullets tore chunks from stone, sparks flaring. Morales ducked low, firing controlled bursts. Kane hobbled into cover, teeth gritted. She pressed against the wall, exhaling slow, eyes sharp. Shadows moved ahead, 3, maybe 4 figures. One larger, commanding, the ringed hand. The target. Her heart clenched. The moment was here again. She steadied her aim, finger brushing the trigger. But then chaos. A door flew open beside the alley. A woman stumbled out, dragging a small child, eyes wide with terror. The child screamed, the sound piercing through everything. The target slipped deeper into shadow, vanishing around a corner. She froze again. Kane roared over the gunfire. "Take the damn shot, Captain, do something." Her silence held. The woman and child fled across the alley, bullets snapping around them, dust spraying their path. Morales covered them instinctively, firing suppressive bursts until they disappeared into safety. By the time it cleared, the target was gone. Again. The alley stank of smoke, sweat, gunpowder. Morales slumped against a wall, chest heaving. Kane stormed toward her, rage twisting his face. "This is on you," he spat. "Twice now. Twice, you've let him slip because you can't separate your heart from the mission." She didn't flinch, she didn't answer. Kane shoved her shoulder hard. "Say something, defend yourself, admit you're not cut out for this." Her silence burned, not weakness, not surrender, a fire banked so deep it scared even her. Morales stepped between them, voice shaking. "Enough, Kane. She saved us back there. She kept that woman and kid alive." Kane sneered. "We're not here to play savior, we're here to end threats, and he jabbed a finger at her. She doesn't have the guts." The words stung, not because they weren't true, but because part of her feared they were. Night fell heavy. They regrouped in the husk of a building, shadows stretching long across cracked floors. Morales sat near her, quiet, offering presence instead of words. Kane stayed distant, sharpening his knife as if each scrape could carve away his fury. She pulled the folded paper from her pocket when no one was looking. The crayon words caught the faint light. "Come back, promise me." Her throat tightened. Every mission, every silence, every hesitation, all of it bent around those words. She had promised her daughter she would return. But what did returning mean if she left pieces of herself behind each time? Sleep came in fragments that night. Dreams of her daughter's laughter shattered by gunfire, the boy with the tray, the woman clutching her child, the ringed hand waving orders in shadow, all tangled, all bleeding into one another. At dawn, command crackled over the radio. New intel. The target wasn't gone. He was regrouping in the cliffs. They had one chance left. Kane's eyes burned when he looked at her. "One chance," he growled, "and this time don't choke." They climbed before sunrise, the air crisp, the rocks sharp under their boots. The cliffs loomed tall, jagged teeth against the sky. Silence pressed heavy between them, broken only by the crunch of gravel and the rasp of breath. She led the ascent, her body moving on instinct, her mind locked in war with itself. Her silence had been strength, dignity, survival, but now it felt like the very thing holding her back. Morales climbed close behind, his voice low, steady. "Captain, you'll know what to do when the time comes. Don't doubt that." She glanced at him. His faith was fragile but real, and it carried her a little higher. At the top, the world spread wide, the desert stretching endless, the wind biting sharp. Smoke curled from a hidden encampment below. The target was there. Through her scope she saw him, alive, breathing, the ring glinting faintly in the sun, surrounded but exposed just enough. Her breath slowed, her fingers steadied. The silence roared inside her, pressing, waiting. Behind her, Kane muttered, "Take the shot." Morales whispered, "Trust yourself." Her daughter's voice echoed from memory, "Come back, promise me." Her pulse pounded, her vision blurred with heat and memory. The boy's eyes, the woman's scream, her daughter's note. And then she exhaled. What did silence sound like, right before a shot that could change everything? It wasn't empty, it was heavy, heartbeats, breath, the faint whistle of wind against the cliff's edge, Kane's muttered curses, Morales's quiet prayer, her own pulse echoing in her ears. Through her scope, the world narrowed. The target's face was clear now, sweat streaking his temple, the ring glinting faintly as he barked orders. A man who had haunted her nights, who had slipped from her sights again and again. This was the moment, the clean line between failure and completion. But memory blurred the line, the boy with the tray, the woman clutching her child, her daughter's crayon words pressed against her heart, all of them breath through the crosshairs. "Take the shot," Kane hissed. His voice cracked like a whip. Morales whispered, "Trust yourself." And deep inside, her daughter's voice echoed soft, fragile, "Come back, promise me." Her finger brushed the trigger, the silence roared. And then she lowered the rifle. Kane exploded. "What the hell are you doing?" His hand shot out, grabbing her arm, trying to yank the rifle back into position. She twisted free, eyes blazing. "Not like this," she said. The words startled even her. Her voice, so rarely heard, cut through the air like thunder. Kane froze, Morales stared, the desert itself seemed to still. Not through another child, not through another family, not through silence that kills more than it saves. Her words were low, steady, weighted with years of holding back. Kane's face twisted with rage. "You're weak." She shook her head. "No, I'm done letting silence decide for me." Before Kane could react, gunfire erupted below. The encampment stirred, men scattering, alarms raised. The target moved, shouting, rushing toward a vehicle. The window was closing. Kane lifted his rifle, fury blazing. But his leg buckled, his shot went wide, dust exploding harmlessly against the ground. Morales looked at her, eyes desperate. "Captain." She steadied her rifle again. Her silence wasn't chains now. It wasn't shield or fear or hesitation. It was choice. It was the pause before truth. She exhaled, squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, sharp and final. The target fell, the ringed hand clawing at dirt before going still. No escape, no more ghosts. The silence after was vast, the kind that stretches for miles, for years. Kane stared at her, stunned. Morales let out a shaky breath, relief softening his shoulders. She lowered the rifle, heart pounding, eyes stinging. The war wasn't over. Missions would come, enemies would rise, silence would return. But this moment, this choice was hers. They descended the cliffs in silence, each step heavy with exhaustion, each carrying their own ghosts. Morales walked close, offering steadiness when hers faltered. Kane limped behind, muttering curses that rang hollow now. By the time they reached extraction, the sun was bleeding into the horizon. The desert glowed with dying light, a strange beauty in the aftermath of violence. On the bird home, Morales leaned close, voice soft. "You spoke for the first time, and you saved us." She looked at him, silent again, but not the same silence. This one carried weight, acknowledgement, gratitude. He smiled faintly. That was enough. Kane said nothing. He stared out the door, jaw clenched, wrestling with his own noise. Hours later, back at base, she finally allowed herself to sit alone. The folded paper was warm against her chest. She pulled it free, unfolding the crumpled edges, smoothing the worn creases. "Come back, promise me." Her lips trembled. She whispered, barely audible, "I'm trying." The words cracked something inside her, not weakness, release. She closed her eyes, imagining her daughter's face, her laughter, her small hands reaching. And for the first time in years, she felt the silence not as weight but as peace. The mission had taken its toll. The world would demand more. But tonight, for one moment, she had chosen, and that choice was hers alone. She stood, slipping the paper back against her heart. The desert wind carried faint echoes of laughter, screams, gunfire, all tangled together. But beneath it all, silence. And in that silence, dignity, not in words, not in noise, but in the act itself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The lights flickered in the distance of the base. The night pressed close. She walked forward, steady, unbroken. And the silence followed her, not as chains, not as fear, but as truth.